Hello everyone and welcome to the Monday Open hosted by the Vantage private client team. My name is Ollie and joining me today we've got Steve. How you going, Steve?
Hi Ollie, I'm good. Yourself after the Oasis concert on Friday?
Oh mate, honestly that was one for the ages. Best I've ever been to, hands down. Okay, so let's move into the agenda for the video ahead. So for any of our returning viewers, this will all look pretty familiar, but for any of our new faces here, this is how we normally run it. So starting off, we'll take a look at the key events from last week, take a look at our major themes and see how this moved the prices. We'll then look into the week ahead, where we'll take a look at some of the major events for the week coming up, see how this fits in with our key themes and give our take on where we think prices will go. We'll then move into the technical corner, where we'll be putting a spotlight on a couple key different markets and analysing them using our technical indicators. And lastly, we'll move into our Q&A section where Steve and I will answer some of your guys' most commonly asked questions from last week. Starting off, moving into the last week section. On your guys' screen, you'll see your top traded products from last week. I don't think quite interesting. We've got the new additions in there being Ethereum and the pound against the yen. But how about you, Steve? Any surprises?
No surprise, good timing, especially with CryptoCon in Sydney coming up.
100%. Everybody come out and come check us out at CryptoCon. We'd love to meet you all. Okay, so moving into last week. Starting off, we've got Japan. I think, Steve, we spoke about this last week. I'm getting so jealous that Japan seems to always be on public holidays on the Mondays.
Yeah, no, we had the Japanese public holiday, so Culture Day. So really looking back at a lot of the sort of recreational and a lot of the traditions within Japan. So I think they've got one more public holiday remaining. So it's probably the second last for the year. But it was pretty interesting with obviously public holidays and the lowest of liquidity across the market. But
they've got Culture Day. We've got Melbourne Cup.
Yeah, all eyes were on really the race that stops the nation. So 30 minutes before the race, basically there was the RBA interest rate on hold at 3.6. So it was a unanimous decision. Sounds a bit like MMA, but after the higher than expected sort of September quarterly inflation, the possibility of an interest rate cut was actually not discussed. So Michelle Bullock mentioned that we didn't increase interest rates as high as other countries during the times they increased, and therefore there's a possibility to have actually less room to come down. And the more recent inflation data reminds us to be more data driven, so really focusing on that. The monetary statement also said that it believed the recent surge in inflation is temporary, significantly sort of increased from their sort of forecast. So we saw the trend mean being higher than their forecast. We had the big four banks. So we had ANZ predict one more 25 basis cut in February next year. CBA thinks that we're actually finished with the rate cuts, while NAB was predicting 25 basis points cuts in May next year, as well as Westpac having a cut in May, as well as August next year for 25 basis points. So interesting to see with how that pans out. Obviously, we've got the sort of this week data that's going to really tie in well when it comes to the RBA decision So we've also got the China CPI and PPI that basically occurred on the weekend. So in combination with the RBA, we're actually seeing it really help the Aussie test that strong resistance at that 66.20 price point. So I'm really looking to kind of break that. And if we do see maybe a major break of that and just keeping above that sort of resistance, that could turn into sort of strong support. So I'm really interested to see with that. Bank of England, it was just on hold as well. We've obviously seen that was actually a closer sort of count. So it was 5-4 when it comes to a vote. So it was pretty much almost a 50-50 call. But it was very interesting to see how that panned out. Could have gone any sort of way. So it was on hold. But interesting to see how that impacted the currency. Obviously, the pound, for example. But yeah, it was probably one of the closest sort of decisions, and we'll see how that sort of eventuates with the next sort of meeting that they hold.
JP
With
Morgan was right out to supporting that rate decision as well. Saw one of our JP Morgan analyst Noakes. I think she was citing some pretty strong retail sales and came out straight away saying they made the right call, the Bank of England. I think they must be pretty stoked.
Yeah, especially with their sort of inflation figures that they've been getting, I think I think personally it was the right call to make. Just kind of wait till the sort of next meeting, and it's more going to be similar to the RBA when it comes to data driven. We saw with obviously New Zealand, the unemployment rate rise. Obviously, you're going to be touching on the New Zealand dollar in the question, so we'll leave that to you a little bit later. We saw the US. So we saw the ADP non-farm employment change. So we saw that sort of data come out last week. We also did see other sort of private data like the PMIs as well as the Michigan consumer sentiment. So we saw that really boost, I guess, a bit more confidence in the indices. But there was also a private challenger survey which was released, and that really impacted the sentiment towards the middle, towards and then the end of the week. We had last week the ongoing sort of US shutdown, while we also had sort of different sort of predictions. So we also had like Michael Berry, so famously for The Big Short, who basically saw the issues forming when it comes to the subprime mortgages before the global financial crisis back in 2008. So he basically put $1 billion worth USD in NVIDIA as well as Palantir put options, which basically means that he's predicting to actually short so that the price will go down when it comes to both of the stocks. So he's basically almost saying to actually short the whole NASDAQ, considering they make up a big portion of the NASDAQ. We also saw the Goldman Sachs as well as Morgan Stanley CEO add to that sentiment, where they expect a 15% to 20% correction within a sort of 6 to 12 months time frame. So it does show that sort of caution. But there was also the Bitcoin. So we saw Bitcoin actually drop temporarily below that psychological barrier, so that 100K USD for the first time since June. That was really looking at, I guess, the 2 billion USD outflows within a 6-day period when it comes to the ETFs. So people kind of looking at getting out the sort of ETFs. Even in October, there was actually a big sort of whale that cashed out $1 billion after 14 years of holding 10,000 Bitcoin for $1.54 each. So Ollie, imagine buying that 14 years ago and then just being a billionaire instantly.
Mate, what were you doing back at those times? Why were you not buying Bitcoin?
If only we knew, in hindsight. But we also saw with Ethereum, we saw the ETFs, there was about 118.5 million out of that, which also asks sort of questions about the liquidity with the main sort of cryptos. So very interesting to see how that sort of pans out. But yeah, going into this week, so looking at this week, we do have a few public holidays. Obviously, we've mentioned quite a few times around the liquidity. So we've got the US, Canada, and France. So yeah, obviously with that, it does cause a bit more volatility. We do have very important the unemployment rate, so to see how that's going to impact the Aussie. Obviously, if that does come in better than expected, and with that sort of employment change, you could see hopefully that 66.20 resistance being broken, and maybe stretching towards those sort of highs, maybe looking at that sort of 67 mark. So it'll be interesting to see when it comes to that. We've got the China data that could also boost the sentiment within the Aussie, as well as the UK sort of data. So the GDP will be an interesting one to see. Plus, a lot of the sort of data points we're seeing sort of reports about the US shutdown, about progress being made within the shutdown, but I don't think we want to get too far ahead of ourselves at the moment. And if we get the CPI and the PPI data, that's going to be really key, especially considering FedPal has actually said about the sort of mandate, really looking at the inflation. But yeah, what's your take, Ollie, on the US shutdown?
All right, mate. Honestly, personal opinion, I'll be shocked if it actually gets finished this week. I think we've seen a lot of big statements, a lot of finger pointing, and I think we're seeing a couple of headlines. Supposedly there's been some deals agreed in the Senate. I'll be honestly shocked if that gets if that picks up steam. I'm looking towards a rejection of that one. But what do you reckon? It's gonna go on this week?
I mean, you never know with Trump. He says a lot of things, but yeah, he's a man of words, but not necessary actions. So we'll wait and see with that.
All right, let's keep an eye on his Twitter account. I'm sure that's that's going to be the market mover, not this shutdown. Okay, let's move into the technical corner. So I'll just share my screen with everyone. So, given that the US is obviously grabbing a lot of the headlines at the moment, I've decided to pick two markets which are very heavily influenced by the US. So, starting off on your guys' screen, you will see the euro against the US dollar on the daily chart. So, over the course of the year, we have been, well, it was a pretty strong uptrend throughout 2025. And then previously, we had been ranging between July till current, but I want to get a look at where we could be going for the week ahead. Namely, I'm looking for a signal to confirm if the more recent bearish trend is going to continue or a continuation of the bullish trend that we have seen over 2025. So, for where we are starting the week here, we are currently sitting around the 1.156. But we also are currently sitting in around its previous resistance from the start of October. So you can see we did find resistance around this price, but around the 1.156. We did fail to break that support. We've traded up, came back down, a little bit of volatility, and then we found resistance here at the 1.166. We then traded, broke its prior support, and then found support at the 1.147 sort of area here, and has since traded up, and it's currently looking to see if this previous support price will act as a resistance. So if I'm looking for a bullish indicator on here, I want to see the prices move higher, and I want to see it break its Friday highs. If we do see a break and a hold above its Friday highs, I'll be looking for an entry to target towards its previous resistance. Furthermore, though, if we do see it break, if we see it fail to break Friday's highs, and we do see it actually break Friday's lows, I'll be looking in for a sell to challenge for a lower low on its previous. So right now we are sitting at a bit of a 50-50 point. So I'm looking for a signal to confirm either way. But because we are waiting for a signal either side, we do need to make sure we've got an effective risk management strategy in place. So say if I am looking for a buy, I'll be looking to probably place a stop around Friday's lows. Likewise, if I'm going into a sell, I'll probably be looking for a stop around the Friday highs. The next market I wanted to take a look at is the NASDAQ, or the US 100 cash CFD. So I'll start off, I'll zoom this out onto the weekly. So the trend essentially going on from early April, around the time of Liberation Day, has been a very strong uptrend. We can see this bullish momentum is also supported by our moving averages, which are all facing up, evenly spaced out, which is a common signal that we could take for bearish momentum. We also do have our MACD line, which is continuing to sit above its signal line, which again does reaffirm bullish momentum. For where we're sitting now, though, I want to get a look at where we could be headed for this week ahead. Reason why I do think it is quite significant is that on Friday, we did see the prices have a pretty strong sell-off, and it actually did find support around its 50-day moving average. And we can see that when the prices do come back down to its moving averages on the last two occasions, or three, I guess, if we include this one, is that we do see this is an area where prices do react. On the last two occasions when we have traded down to its 50 moving average, we have seen a pretty strong bounce off. Likewise, well, towards start of October. So I'm looking for a signal to see if the bullish momentum is still in play and if prices will react in a similar manner. So I'll move into the 4-hour chart now. And we can see, so if I'm looking for a bullish signal of this, I want to see the prices break the moving averages, namely the 50 moving average. If I see a break and a hold above this moving average, we could see it then target towards its Friday highs. And if we see a break above that, I'll be looking for an entry to challenge new all-time highs. Other side of that, though, is that we can see on the open this morning, we did see the prices did jump a little bit. And historically, when we do see a market jump at the open, we do tend to see it fill the gap. So we could see a bit of a pullback on price. If we do fill the gap and then find support to move higher, I'll also be looking for an entry in there. But otherwise, if we do see a break lower on here, we could see it consolidate for a little bit, could see it range, or we could see it challenge its Friday lows. But either side, I will be needing an effective risk management strategy in play once I have got a signal and a confirmation for the direction of my trade. So that brings us to the end of the technical section. So moving into the Q&A section, I just want to start off on your screen. You can see a little banner. It's got Stephen, my pretty face, just on there. I've actually had a lot of questions asking if we're going to be at CryptoCon this year. So easiest answer for that, yes, we will be at CryptoCon. We'll be there on the 22nd and the 23rd of November, on the Saturday and the Sunday. We'd love to see as many of you guys as possible down there. So if you are planning to go, please feel free to reach out to Steve or I or your relationship manager. We'll set some time up and we'd love to say hi. So moving into the Q&As. Steve, would you like to take it away with question one?
Yeah, so question one is, how does the US quarterly earnings season impact indices? So good question when it comes to the US earnings. Obviously, we're in the subtown when it comes to the earnings season. So generally it occurs basically January, April, July, and October. And a lot of the sort of indices are impacted by the sort of bigger companies that make up obviously the S&P 500 as well as the NASDAQ, so the top sort of technology 100 companies. So most are really looking at the forward outlook. So for example, this sort of period is really looking at 2026 to get a gauge of the overall sentiment within the US economy from a jobs perspective, so whether or not the companies are doing well to actually have any sort of hirings or any sort of opencies. So during the sort of recent, we've also seen a lot of sort of expectations priced in. So recently we've seen the results like Palantir actually lead off to a sell-off, mainly because of the sort of analysts raising the alarms around the valuation being inflated. So it's had a really good run throughout this year, as well as also that sort of short position that Michael Burry put on. When you've got those sort of credible people who've been able to predict in the past, it does add a bit of weight. And yeah, ever since their sort of results, it's been a bit of a sell-off. People are just reevaluating the forward outlook, while markets are actually priced in higher valuations and expectations for a lot of the bigger companies. So a lot of the companies other than Palantir, like the Mag 7, they're really indicating based on the valuations at the moment, which obviously US Fed Powers also said could be overvalued at the moment. They're really indicating that they've got to be perfect with their earnings outlooks and forecasts. So it really impacts how the indices go. So the US the Nasdaq, so US 100, as well as S&P 500, and therefore also looks at the DXY, or the dollar index. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Steve. And question 2, I'll take this one. It will be, what is happening with the New Zealand dollar at the moment? Easiest answer for that is it is hitting multi-year lows against a lot of different currencies at the moment, and it is continuing its downslide. It's continuing to weaken. For reference, we are seeing it hit 12-year lows versus the Aussie dollar, 16-year lows versus the euro, and 10-year lows versus the pound for the Kiwi. So, in terms of the longer term factors causing this, is that the New Zealand dollar and as well as the Aussie, they are considered risk currencies. So, factors such as COVID, the trade wars, even if you're going back to Brexit sort of times, it leads to a risk off sentiment and drives down demand for the Kiwi dollar. We've also got volatility in commodity prices, which is having a bit of a knock on the New Zealand dollar, particularly with dairy prices going into Southeast Asia. More short-term factors would actually be the RBNZ signaling their intention to cut rates further after surprising markets with a 50 basis point cut at the last meeting. We're seeing the RBNZ heads citing weaker labour market conditions as well as weak consumer spending to basically make the case that they do need to cut rates further, and leading to some selling on the Kiwi dollar as a result. And that brings us to the end of the video today. So a recording of this video will be uploaded on YouTube once we have concluded. As well, we will be posting a link for the recording in our VIP chat room as well as on Telegram. For anyone who has yet to visit our Telegram group or the VIP chat room, I would highly recommend doing so. If you're looking for any information in terms of how to get there, please feel free to reach out to Steve or I directly, as well as posting in the VIP chat room any questions you guys might have for next week. All right, that's all from me. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And Steve, I'll see you later.
Thank you, Ollie, and good afternoon, everyone.